Wow. And then from there, what happened? Did you go
So
to, because you wound up going to Goldman Sachs. Well, you were working for a company that got bought by Goldman Sachs, as I
that's
remember.
exactly right. So from getting that started, I went to created another business plan and went to a company called Sanwa BGK Securities. Now, Sanwa was, back in 1990, the Japanese, or prior to 1990, the Japanese banks were the biggest banks in the world.
Hmm.
And, there was 15, 16 of the top banks were all Japanese banks. So there was a lot of the global money centers were leaning into them and their leverage, and they had a big footprint. And so they had purchased, acquired a primary dealer called BGK Securities. So it became Sanwa BGK Securities, and I basically replicated the same model with more banks and more lines and more leverage and more clients. That went for a bit and had an opportunity to move into, but it was just two guys. It was me and this other guy that I brought with me, and we were working 12-hour shifts apiece, and that's pretty rough. And I was still learning. Right, I was still green, but technology was really kicking in at that point, and I had an edge on the market because I understood how to use DDE in spreadsheets and pull data in, source it, dynamic data exchange. I think that's what it was called, but you could pull live feeds into a spreadsheet and then build your pricing models, essentially your algo type models, so that you can make a market on the fly using
Did you
voice.
know something about algos before that, or you'd been reading concepts on it?
No, it's just math. I mean, we call them algos today, but they've been around a long time.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then so I went.
And is this, you were saying this is pre 1990, so I assume this is post the crash of 1987, where you're taking advantage of sort of where the dust had settled and growing from there?
Yeah, yeah,
That's good.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and I was lucky, Scott. To be honest with you, I had a lot of it's been like just being at the right place at the right
Yeah.
time and making sure that you close the deal that's in front of you. But
Hmm.
I took a job as the chief dealer at the Chicago Corporation, and with the Chicago Corporation, it was an investment banking firm, very white gumshoe. Investment banking firm in Chicago, right there on LaSalle Street. They had a decent equity presence, but all of their money was made on the bond side, their bond deals or leasing deals and what have you. And then it was me and a few other people that set up this new division, and they had some real guys. I'd been doing this on my own without any mentors, so to speak. So it was just me by the seat of my pants, dodging bullets and crawling under the wire. They had hired some real people that knew what they were doing, seasoned professionals, and I learned so much from them. But I was the chief dealer. I was a really good trader, really good market maker, and in a traditional sense. And back in the day when they call on the phone and say, "I need a price on X," and it's like I was decent at it.
Hmm.
What made you decent at it? What made you good at it, do you think, in your mind?
The ability to, I don't know, maybe ADD. I'm not sure. It was the ability to kind of look at a lot of things at the same time.
Yeah. I'm a
Mhm.
big believer in ADHD.
And so I could look at a lot of things at the same time and process a lot of information very quickly.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of that, I would say fearlessness. I never felt the pain from the market swings. I just, of course, if it's in my own personal account, I might lose my mind. But, when I'm trading the company's money, I know how much leverage I've got. I know what the numbers look like. I know what my
Hmm.
job is. And you just do it.
You can
So,
avoid emotion creeping in and making a decision for you, which might not be
absolutely.
the best decision.
Absolutely, and just trading, market making. When the markets are active, it's not really that way anymore because of the electronification of the markets. But you could get into a rhythm where you could feel the market move, right?
Mm-hmm.
And having that little bit of experience in the pits helped immensely when you can feel the market, where it's going, and how things are trading, and get a sense of what's going on. Of course, you still had to worry about central bank intervention, big news items, and things like that, and getting run over. But it helps to have the ability to process a lot of information and not be susceptible to emotion, I think. But yeah, I
Sure.
was, I was a chief dealer there. That department, that division actually, made so much money for the company that it became the number one producer in the company. It became
Hmm.
the money center for that company. And so much so that ABN AMRO bought us.
Hmm.
And while I was there, as a matter of fact, and I hadn't been there for maybe 2 years, but the chairman, Jack Wing, he actually stopped by the trading desk and asked me to talk to him for a minute. He said, "Listen, I want you to set up a proprietary trading unit." And I'm like, I wasn't even sure how to do that. And I said, "Well, what makes you think that that's a good idea?" He's like, I don't know. I just want you to do it. It's like, okay, well, how do you want me to approach it? And he said, well, you tell me. And I said, well, what's my budget? He goes, you tell me. And I said, okay. So I went off into left field. This is 1992-ish, right? 1992 or 93. I'd have been closer to 93. I was always a big fan. You were talking to, we have discussed AI. I was always a big fan of artificial intelligence. And so I hired a kid right out of college, University of Chicago, with a degree in cognitive science. And I roped in another guy who was my senior. And that was when, they set up a degree program at the University of Chicago. He was one of the first guys that ever graduated from that program, to my knowledge. And I roped in another guy he was a former Annapolis grad, maybe a major or something, a colonel in the Air Force. But he was one of the key guys, and he was also a teacher or a professor at the University of Chicago. I pulled him in as a contributor on that project. But he had developed the topographical mapping system. He and the team, he was part of the team, developed the topographical mapping system for the Tomahawk cruise missile. So I thought, well, he obviously knows something, and he built an AI engine it was incredible. And the problem...
What kind of tool was he using at that point within the AI?
I mean, we were running. He was running it on a PC. It was designed to run on a PC, a desktop. And at that time, I think we had just graduated from 33 megahertz to 66, and the Pentium 100 was on the horizon. So if you could see,
I remember that.
if you can remember, think about the chasm between how slow those PCs were compared to what we have now.
Yeah.
And as you guys know, and people watching will know, that AI requires massively parallel processing. You can't run the iterations on the learning algos. It's persistent, and you run that in series, and it'll take forever. So what I did was to defeat that. We also got one of the first versions of MATLAB. And MATLAB is, it's Pythonish, right? Mm-hmm. But it is, it's run by, it's a real company that's run by professors and thinkers, and everything's QA'd, and it's proper. Mm-hmm. So we were using MATLAB and the system that he built, and we built our own system, stitched it together, and
let's put it this way, you stitched the processing together. Is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did he come up with that idea? Did you guys come up with that idea together? Say, look, this will create the power that we need. Is that something that was being done before that?
No, I don't think so. I think we were right on the edge of development. I mean, there was chatter about AI at that time, and I'm sure some of the high-end prop firms or hedge funds were certainly looking at it. I know of a couple that might have been, but the reality is that there was only a handful of us that were really in it, getting it done. And the way I defeated that, the processing power issue was the Pentium 100 did come along, but it was still too slow. And what I found was that in the learning process and the training of the neural networks, that the surface state, the state space, right? That because you're running this multi-dimensional matrix, that's the data set that you're using. The complexity of that multi-dimensional state space is such that the learning process can get caught in any number of various crevices, grooves, or whatever, and not learn right. And so you get these neural networks. You'll train a neural network, and it'll think that it's trading perfectly every time, and it trades every day, and it's wrong. Mm-hmm. Or you'll get it where it just it won't execute any trades.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you say that something was doing something wrong, was there a way nowadays with machine learning they call those bits adversarial filters, I believe, things like that. How did you guys know something was wrong within your process?
That's a great point. Observation mainly, and the inability to differentiate which ones that look like they might be working. So what I did was we created a Beowulf cluster, which runs on Linux. And a Beowulf cluster is a massively parallel system where you take over half a server room, and which is probably what they're doing today. And I'm not up to speed on how they're running these neural network systems, but the Beowulf cluster is a massively parallel system that allows all of these processors to run parallel. And we did that. In fact, I think we created one of the fastest, if not the fastest, networks, computers, processing centers in the state of Illinois, if not the country. I mean, it was wicked fast.
And is this when Goldman Sachs started paying attention to you guys?
No, no,
Or
no. This
was
was
this?
this. I couldn't have been more than 29 or 30 years old when this happened.
Uh,
And so the way we did is we decided that the best thing to do was run 500 of these neural network training systems at the same time, and then look at the distribution curve, like how they perform, like what's the in sample and post sample performance, and then that in the post sample, if they didn't do any trades, those all got thrown out. If they traded every day, those all got thrown out, and then it was simply a voting system. So with that, you get it's kind of like annealing in engineering. You're covering the entire state space on your analysis, and you're less prone to error. So those neural networks voted simply all together, and you average everything out, and the system worked. I mean, it really did. But here's the odd thing. It only worked on a handful of instruments, pairs. So I had my guys reverse engineer all of this, and we looked at it very carefully to see what it's keying on. And I'll make a long story short. Turns out that and we created, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 new technical studies that I would say that mathematicians and quants are using them today. But I thought we were one of the first to develop them, and we reverse engineered. Turns out it was just keying on fat tails. So if the market would move away from its current price too far, too fast, it statistically, it's revert to
regress.
the mean. Yes,
Right.
it's going to revert to the mean. So that's all it was doing. It was just fading big moves. And, I felt kind of bad because we did all that work to get to that, but that's what it was keying on. Yeah.